They thought they were pulling off the perfect heist, because the palazzo seemed silent, the vault unguarded, the timing flawless. But they didn't know the jewels belonged to the world's deadliest mafia king. Night draped itself over Palazzo Martins like a velvet curtain, swallowing the snow-covered estate in a hush too perfect to be real. Lena paused at the treeline, the cold biting her cheeks, her breath clouding the air as she studied the glowing windows ahead. The place looked asleep. A giant, ancient beast pretending to rest. Behind her, the crew gathered, Marco cracking his knuckles, Jonah double-checking the hacked feed on his tablet, Reed adjusting the straps on his pack, and Vince grinning like he'd already spent the payday. They were the kind of thieves who survived because they trusted each other more than luck. And tonight, luck felt like it was whispering their names. If you believe in courage, the kind that rises even when danger warns you to turn back, stick with us. People like you belong here. They moved like shadows across the snowy grounds, slipping through the servants' entrance Lena had unlocked hours earlier. No alarms. No guards. No signs of life except the steady hum of chandeliers upstairs. According to their intel, Albert Martins was in Switzerland at a syndicate summit. The staff dismissed. The estate empty. A perfect window. The vault door was exactly where it should have been, tucked behind a carved wardrobe and sealed with antique steel. Marco placed his palm against the scanner. Jonah spliced a wire. Reed braced for the click. But the vault door slid open on its own. They exchanged glances. "That's convenient," Vince whispered. "Too convenient." Inside, the bloodline regalia rested on a velvet pedestal like trophies stolen from the gods themselves. Rubies the size of fists. Obsidian shards catching the light like they were breathing. Gold so old it looked poured from the earth's core. And at the center, the necklace. Heavy.
Pulse-like. Wrong.
Lena lifted it, and warmth rushed through her palm, throbbing like a heartbeat. "Probably just adrenaline," Marco said. "You're spooked." But the palace seemed to lean in closer, as if listening. The moment the jewels left the pedestal, the lights flickered. A low hum shuddered through the floorboards. The chandeliers trembled above them. "Bag them and go," Lena ordered. They barely made it 3 steps into the hall before the entire palazzo reacted. Doors slammed shut one after the other. Boom.
Boom. Boom.
Steel shutters crashed over every window. Their comms burst into static and died. The temperature plunged. "What the hell?" Reed muttered. "We triggered something." "No alarms," Jonah said, knees buckling slightly. "No sensors. It's like the house sealed itself." They sprinted toward the surveillance room. Lena's heart hammered. She'd planned for guards, alarms, debt collectors, even an ambush from Albert's rivals. She hadn't planned for this. The monitors flickered to life. Albert's private jet? Still in the hangar. Albert's suite? Lights on. A dark figure in the south hallway? Watching the camera, then vanishing without moving. Jonah stepped back, shaking. "He's here." He never left. Vince didn't answer. "Vince," Lena called. His gear was scattered across the floor near the stairwell, his bag torn open, phone crushed. A long smear of ash stretched across the polished wood, like something had dragged him away piece by piece. The scream reached them a second later.
Distant. Echoing.
Not human. Lena swallowed hard. They didn't just steal from the richest man alive. They stole the one thing keeping his monster contained. Snow began to fall harder outside, as if the world itself was sealing the palazzo under another layer of silence. Lena pressed 2 fingers against the ash smear on the floor, her pulse hammering against her skin. It was still warm. Too warm. Whatever had happened to Vince had happened seconds ago. "We need to move," Marco said abruptly, his voice tight, hiding panic under anger. "Find him. Find any exit. I don't care which." "There are no exits," Jonah whispered, staring at the camera feed as though hypnotized. Everything just locked. All at once. Reed paced, rubbing his hands together. Some kind of system override? Emergency lockdown? Maybe Albert got paranoid and... No, Lena rose, every instinct screaming. "This isn't a security system. Not one I've ever seen. The lights above them flickered again, longer this time, shadows stretching across the hall like fingers clawing at the edges of the floor. Lena's breath fogged the air. Everything smelled older.
Dustier.
Like the house was breathing. "We stay together," she said. All eyes open. No one wanders off. They made their way toward the main atrium, where twin staircases curled upward toward the upper floors. Massive portraits lined the walls, men with sharp eyes, too sharp, painted centuries ago, yet following them as they passed. Candle sconces flickered though no one had lit them. "Guys," Jonah whispered, pointing at a portrait. An older man with a jaw carved like stone, dark eyes burning out of the frame. Albert Martins. The plaque read, "Patriarch of the Bloodline." Marco scoffed.
Yeah.
"We know he's scary." "Look closer," Jonah said. The eyes in the painting glowed faintly red. Lena's stomach dropped. "This place is wrong. Every part of it is wrong." Reed stepped forward, touching the frame, and the chandelier above them rattled violently, sending a rain of glass dust sprinkling down. "No one touches anything," Lena snapped, grabbing his wrist. "We don't know what this house responds to." But the house was already responding. A distant thump echoed through the walls. Then another. Slow, deliberate. Like footsteps coming up from beneath the floor. Jonah's lip trembled. "What is that?" "Not Vince," Reed whispered. Lena felt the weight of the jewels in her bag, hotter now, like they pulsed with every echoing step. "Downstairs," she said, pointing to the basement doors. "If Vince is alive, he's down there." "And if he's not?" Marco asked. She forced her voice steady. "Then whatever took him is." They descended into the dark, flashlights cutting thin beams through the dust. The steps creaked beneath their feet, each one groaning louder than the last. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. Something brushed past Lena's leg.
She froze.
"Don't move," she whispered. The beam of Jonah's flashlight flickered, and for a split second, Lena saw it. Something hunched, pale, and impossibly fast darting between the stone pillars. Eyes like embers, claws scraping stone. Gone in a heartbeat. Jonah gasped. What was? A scream ripped through the basement, echoing from somewhere in the dark hallways.
"Vince."
This time, Lena didn't hesitate.
"Run," she said. "Now."
Whatever lived in this house wasn't guarding the jewels. It was waiting for them. Snow hammered against the windows like a warning the world was trying desperately to deliver, but inside the palazzo, the cold felt deeper, seated into the marble and bone of the place. Lena stood completely still at the bottom of the basement staircase, her chest rising and falling as the scream died into echo. "Vince," she shouted, though her voice cracked under the weight of dread. Nothing answered. Just the quiet. Just the house breathing. Jonah's flashlight jittered in his trembling hand. Marco cursed under his breath, running a hand through his hair. Reed's eyes were huge, pupils blown wide, his breath misting the frozen air. "What the hell was that?" Reed whispered. "No idea," Lena said. "But we're going back upstairs." They moved fast, scrambling up the old steps two at a time, not daring to look back into the dark. The moment they reached the ground floor, Lena slammed the basement door shut and locked it, even though she knew, deep down, locks meant nothing here. Marco scoffed. "He's messing with us."
"Vince."
"This is just one of his stupid pranks." Jonah spun on him. "Did that sound like a prank to you?"
"Did it?"
"Because No," Reed snapped. "I smelled something. Burning." He swallowed hard. "Like meat. Like skin." Lena placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Reed." "No," he said again, voice cracking. "I know what I smelled." A long silence stretched between them, thick enough to choke on. Marco raised his chin. "We're not going to freak out because Reed thinks he smelled something weird. Vince is alive somewhere in this house. We find him. End of story." But the tension was shifting, fatally. Cracks forming in places Lena feared they wouldn't recover from. They moved toward the main hall, snowlight filtering through the high windows and painting them in ghostly blue. Lena approached one of the massive panes and tried sliding it open.
Locked.
Reed stepped up with him and tried forcing it. Nothing. Marco planted his shoulder and shoved. Still nothing. These windows aren't supposed to lock from the inside, Reed murmured. Not by themselves. Move, Marco grunted, leaning back. We'll break it. He slammed his elbow into the glass, once, twice. Not even a tremor. Jonah touched the edge of the frame with one finger. This is shatterproof. Industrial grade. It wasn't like this earlier. It changed. Glass doesn't change genius, Marco said flatly. Neither do houses, Jonah snapped. But here we are. Lena cut between them before it escalated. Enough. Try another window. They moved along the wall. Window after window, same story. Unbreakable. Weapons, Lena said, pulse rising. Let's blast the door open. Marco, your bag. Marco dropped to one knee and unzipped his pack. Empty. What the? He growled. Where are my guns? Reed checked his bag. Nothing. Jonah dug through his pack.
Gone.
Someone took them, Marco said, voice dangerous. No one touched your bag, Jonah said. We were all together. Marco stepped forward. You calling me blind? Stop. Lena barked. They froze. Lena took Marco's pack gently from his hands. Look at the fabric. No tears. No marks. Nothing. The weapons didn't go missing. They vanished, Jonah whispered. Behind them, the lights flickered overhead. Just once. Just enough to raise the hair on Lena's arms. We're checking the security room, Lena said.
Now.
They crossed the hallway quickly, their footsteps echoing too loudly on the marble. Lena pushed open the door to the surveillance room, dim, humming, cold. Jonah slid into the chair and woke the monitors. Lena's breath stilled. Albert's private jet? Still at the estate airfield. Still locked in its hangar. His plane never left, she murmured. Marco frowned. What? He wasn't in Switzerland, Jonah said, voice thin. That was just chatter on the darknet. Rumors. One of the monitors flickered. Albert's private suite.
Light on.
Sheets disturbed, like someone had been sitting there minutes ago. A shadow fell across the floor, but no one was in the frame. Lena felt her mouth go dry. Then a different screen glitched. Hallway cam 4B. A blurry, humanoid figure stood mid-corridor, facing directly into the camera, as if watching them through the lens. It tilted its head, slow, unnatural, then vanished. Rewind, Marco said, stepping closer. Jonah tried. The feed refused to rewind. It played the same frame again and again. Then the figure blurred out of existence entirely. No, Reed whispered. That's not possible. That's... Jonah flinched, turning his head sharply as if someone had whispered into his ear. What?
Lena asked.
Jonah swallowed. Something said my name. Marco rolled his eyes. Here we go. No, I'm serious. It sounded like someone standing right behind me. He swept his flashlight across the dark corners of the room. Like a voice. A whisper. Lena watched him closely. His pupils were dilated. His chest rising too fast. She forced a breath. We keep moving. We find Vince. No one goes off alone. Everyone stays in sight of each other. The hallways seemed narrower now, the sconces flickering with a sluggish pulse. Reed glanced over his shoulder every few seconds. Jonah kept rubbing his ears like he could erase the whisper. A subtle shift in the air brushed Lena's neck, cold and damp. She didn't mention it. They moved deeper into the east wing. A cold draft swept past them. Anyone else feel that? Reed asked. No windows open, Jonah said. Marco snorted. Old house. Drafts happen. Lena shook her head slowly. Not like that. A shadow skittered across the ceiling above them. Fast, too fast, gone before anyone fully looked up. Reed gasped. Something moved. Marco pointed his flashlight upward. I didn't see anything. But Lena had. A shape. Long-limbed. Clinging to the ceiling like it belonged there. She said nothing, afraid that if she gave it voice, the truth would solidify. We're splitting up, Marco announced. No, Lena said. We stay together. We said. Vince is dying somewhere in this house. Marco's voice thundered through the hallway. And we're wasting time wandering around like idiots. Jonah shoved him. Oh, so now we should split up? When something invisible is dragging people away. Marco shoved him back. At least I'm doing something. Lena stepped between them. Enough. We do this smart. We cover ground in pairs. Marco shrugged.
Fine.
Reed, you're with me. Reed hesitated, then nodded. Jonah looked at Lena. What about us? We take the West Wing. Meet back at the Black Staircase in 10 minutes. If anyone is late, everyone comes running. Marco and Reed headed east, flashlights slicing through the dark. Lena and Jonah turned west. The further they walked, the colder it got, like the temperature was being sucked out of the air. Lena, Jonah murmured. You really think Vince is alive? Lena swallowed the truth. Until we prove otherwise, yes. They reached the ornate black staircase, a spiraling iron monstrosity rising 3 floors. Jonah checked his watch. 7 minutes. They should be close. Then came the sound. Scray away up. Metal on stone. Like claws dragging along the walls. Jonah froze. That was beside us. Lena took a slow step forward. Reed? Marco. Silence. Jonah shone his light along the wall. The wallpaper was torn in long strips, fresh tears, like something had clawed its way out of the stone. Lena looked around the staircase. Empty. Too empty. We meet the others, she decided.
Now.
They headed toward the East Wing junction. Reed's flashlight lay on the floor. Its beam pointed upward, trembling slightly. Reed, Lena whispered. She bent to pick up the flashlight. The wall beside her bulged, as if something inside it was pushing outward. Then, a hand shot out.
Pale.
Long-fingered, clamping around Reed's throat and dragging him screaming into the wall panel. His body vanished through solid wood like it wasn't even there. Jonah screamed. Reed! Lena grabbed his arm as he lunged. No, and oh, Jonah. You'll be next. Reed's scream was muffled now, echoing behind the walls, moving fast. Dragged deeper and deeper, away from them. Until silence rushed back like a wave. Jonah fell to his knees, shaking violently. Lena stared at the wall, smooth.
Perfect.
No cracks. No seams. Reed was gone. Taken. The house had claimed its second victim. Jonah was still on his knees, chest heaving, staring at the stretch of wall that had swallowed Reed whole. Lena grabbed his shoulders and forced him to look at her.
Jonah.
Hey, look at me. His eyes flicked upward, glossy, broken. He's gone, Jonah whispered. He was right in front of us, and God, he was right there. I know. We should have dragged him back, we should have. Jonah. Lena tightened her grip. If you had gone after him, you'd be gone too. Footsteps thudded down the hall. Marco sprinting toward them, flashlight swinging wildly. What happened? Where's Reed? Jonah let out a sound that wasn't quite a sob. More like a crack in something vital. The walls took him, he said. Marco stared. Say that again? Lena stood. The wall opened. A hand pulled him inside. He didn't stand a chance. Marco's face twitched, hard. He kicked the wall panel, metal toe of his boot booming through the corridor.
No. No, no.
Reed is alive. He has to be alive. His breath grew ragged. He wouldn't just die. Jonah snapped. You think we let that happen? You think we didn't try to? Enough, Lena growled. Argue later. Move now. Marco tried to steady himself, but his voice shook. This is exactly what I was talking about. This place is a trap. We return the jewels. Maybe it stops whatever's happening. That's exactly what I want to do, Jonah said desperately. We put them back. All of them. We undo this. Lena reached into her coat and pulled the relic case out, still heavy, still humming through the fabric. Jonah stepped back like the thing was venom. Marco glared at him. Return them? Seriously? Albert will kill us the second we hand them over. He doesn't forgive trespassing. He definitely doesn't forgive theft. Jonah jabbed a finger toward the wall. Have you looked around, Marco? You think Albert's worse than that? Marco didn't answer. He couldn't. Lena opened the case. Instantly, the temperature dropped. The jewels glowed, red, black, deep green, alive, pulsing like the veins of a heart. A low thrum filled the hall. Jonah whispered, "Why are they doing that?" Lena didn't know, but she felt it, like static under the skin, like heat that wasn't heat, somewhere between fire and memory. She lifted the necklace. The moment her skin touched the metal, the air warped. A whisper slithered behind her ear. A language she didn't know. A call she did. Then flash. A vision slammed into her skull. A silhouette, too tall, too thin, standing in a room of stone. A man screaming as something fed on him, shadows writhing around his body. Blood smeared into symbols on a floor older than the palazzo. Doors carved with ancient runes, chained shut. A crown of blackened bone. Hands, monstrous hands, reaching toward her. Lena. She stumbled backward, dropping the necklace. The relic hit the marble with a metallic chime, lights flickering overhead. Marco caught her before she fell. What happened? Lena, what did you see? She pressed a hand to her temple, breath shaking. Those jewels are not treasure. They're seals. Jonah stared. Seals for what? Lena lifted her head. For something worse than Albert. Silence. Cold. Heavy. Marco swallowed. And we took them out of the vault.
Great.
Jonah ran both hands through his hair. We need to call someone. The police, the syndicates, the military, anyone. Someone has to help us. Try, Lena said. They all pulled out their phones. Jonah dialed emergency services.
Static.
Lena tried her informant line.
Static.
Marco tried the satellite backup. Static. Smoke, thin, electric, curled from the charging ports. Jonah dropped his phone with a shout. It burned me. The screens all blackened, melted from the inside out. A mechanical groan rumbled through the hall, a sound like the house exhaling. Then, Lena, Jonah froze. Did you hear that? Lena stiffened. The whisper drifted down the corridor, faint, distant, wrong. Lena, help me. Vince's voice. Or something wearing his voice. Jonah took a step backward.
No.
No, he died. We all heard him scream. Maybe not, Lena whispered. Marco shook his head. Or it wants us to think he didn't. But the voice called again. Please, I'm hurt. Jonah didn't wait. He sprinted down the hallway. Vince. Jonah, stop. Lena chased him. The corridor twisted with every step, lights stretching long, shadows bending unnaturally. The voice grew louder, more urgent. This way, this way. Marco caught up beside Lena. It's luring us. I know, she said. Jonah skidded around a corner into the west wing. Lena and Marco followed and froze. A smear of ash lay scattered across the floor. Vince's mask sat in the middle of it. Jonah fell to his knees.
No.
No. Then his head jerked up. He's still here.
He has to be.
The ashes could be something else. Anything else. We keep looking. Marco put a slow hand on Jonah's shoulder.
Jonah.
Listen. A click echoed through the hall. Lena spun. A panel in the wall unlatched. A thin slit of darkness opened. Jonah scrambled to his feet. Vince. Lena grabbed his arm. Don't. But the door opened wider on its own, like a mouth stretching for a scream. Cold poured out of it.
Rot.
Old death. Marco pointed his flashlight into the gap. Stairs descended into pitch-black stone. And, at the bottom, a figure. Standing still. Facing them.
Too still.
Too patient. Marco whispered, That's not Vince. The figure lifted its head. Its face blurred. Its outline wrong. Its shadow, moving independently. Then it whispered, Come closer. Jonah bolted backward.
No.
No. Hell no, we're not going down there. The panel slammed shut with a thunderous crack. The lights flickered violently, and the house began to hum with a low, rising growl. The relics in Lena's hands burned hot enough she dropped the case. She knelt, staring at the trembling jewels. She finally understood something she wished she hadn't. The vault wasn't a prison for treasure. It was a prison for a monster, and they had opened the door.
Lena rose slowly.
Her voice barely a whisper. The bloodline, it's awake. Lena stood frozen at the sealed panel where the shadowy figure had vanished. Jonah trembled beside her, one hand over his mouth, while Marco paced tight circles like a caged animal. The relics in their case still pulsed faintly, heartbeat like wrong. A soft footstep behind them made all three whirl around. A man leaned casually against the far doorframe.
Tall.
Dusty jacket. Calm eyes. Like he'd simply walked out for coffee, not through a war zone. Easy, he said, raising his hands. I'm not here to hurt you. Jonah grabbed Marco's arm. Oh, thank God, someone else is alive. Lena's stomach clenched. Something was off. His stance was too relaxed. Too clean. His breathing too steady. You're Calder, Lena said quietly. Our inside contact. He offered a faint smile. That would be me. Marco moved toward him, relief sweeping over his face. Man, you have no idea what's going on in here. Actually, Calder interrupted, stepping forward. I do. His voice was smooth. Too smooth. Lena stepped between them. Where have you been? Hiding, Calder replied. Albert's guards turned on me the second the lockdown triggered. I barely made it out alive. He said it so convincingly Jonah nearly sagged with relief. But Lena saw it, a flicker behind his eyes. Not fear. Not exhaustion. Something else. Something too calm. Too knowing. She said nothing yet. Calder nodded toward the hallway they had come from. We can't stay here. I know a route. Not an exit. It's a service tunnel. Leads closer to the perimeter generators. If we can shut them down, you'll have a path out. Marco nodded immediately. Finally. Someone who knows what the hell he's doing. Lena touched Marco's arm. Don't trust him. Something's wrong. He hissed. We don't have options. Jonah, voice thin, whispered. Please. I don't want to die in here. If there's a way out, we have to try. Calder smiled faintly, patient, polite. Follow me. And that was how they ended up trailing behind him, Lena last, watching every twitch in his shoulders. The palazzo's hallways felt alive now, the walls humming faintly, lights dimming as if tracking their movement. Calder walked with steady, unhurried steps. Too steady for someone claiming to have been hunted. Jonah whispered to Lena, Do you think Vince and Reed could still be alive? Lena said nothing. Calder answered anyway. If they are, they won't be for long. Jonah flinched. What? Calder glanced back, expression perfectly mild. This house doesn't keep prisoners. Before Jonah could respond, a long shadow stretched across the floor in front of them, thin, jagged, moving independently of any light source. Calder didn't even look surprised. Move, he said calmly.
Now.
Lena didn't hesitate. She jerked Jonah back just as a shape dropped from the ceiling. A creature, smoke.
Bone.
Tendon. Claws long enough to scrape the marble. A jaw that unhinged too far, too wide. Jonah screamed. The creature lunged. Lena shoved Jonah aside. It clawed the air where his torso had been. Marco roared and slammed into Jonah, pulling him out of reach, barely. The creature's second swipe carved through the air, slicing Marco's jacket open like tissue. Run! Lena shouted. They sprinted. Calder didn't run. He stepped aside, almost ceremoniously, letting the beast rush past him without so much as looking at it. Jonah stumbled. The creature pounced. Marco tackled him to the ground, taking the brunt of the hit. The claws shredded Marco's sleeve, ripping deep lines across his arm. He grunted in pain. Lena grabbed a fallen metal pole and slammed it into the creature's side. It screamed, glass shattering, bone grinding. But it didn't fall. It turned toward her, eyes like molten pitch, hands twitching with hunger. It was about to leap. Calder spoke. A command. In a language older than the walls. The creature jerked midair, halted. Its body convulsed, like invisible chains pulled it backward. It snarled, resisting, but slowly withdrew into the nearest shadow, disappearing like water down a drain. Silence. Jonah sobbed. Marco pressed his bleeding arm. Lena stared. Slowly, Calder turned to them. "Are you all right?" he asked pleasantly. Pleasantly. Jonah's voice cracked. What the hell was that? Calder tilted his head. One of Albert's ancestral guardians. The house conjures them when the seals are removed. He said it like explaining the weather. Jonah shivered. You controlled it. It listened to you. Calder's gaze flicked briefly to Lena. It didn't listen. I simply reminded it who I serve. Marco blinked. Who you serve? Lena stepped forward, voice low. Albert. Calder smiled politely. Of course. Jonah backed away.
No. No.
You said Albert's guards turned on you. They did. Calder took a step closer. Because I released the lockdown. Marco's jaw dropped.
What?
Why? Calder exhaled softly, as if disappointed. Because your team took the bloodline regalia. The seals. You removed the chains keeping Albert's curse bound. Jonah whispered. You lured us here. Calder nodded lightly. Albert wanted to wake. Someone needed to unbind him. You were bold enough to try stealing from him. It made you the perfect candidates. Lena's blood ran cold. You used us. I guided you, Calder corrected softly. It's different. Marco lunged at him. Calder didn't move. Marco's fist stopped an inch from his face, like hitting solid air. His eyes widened. Calder whispered, I would not do that. Marco's body trembled, frozen in place by something unseen. Lena grabbed his jacket, yanking him back. What do you want?
Lena asked.
Calder's eyes flickered, briefly, glowing gold in the dim. I want Albert whole again. I want the world to remember what true power looks like. And I want you to understand, he touched the nearest relic necklace hanging from Lena's torn pack, that these are not jewelry. They're chains. They bind the monster in his human skin. Jonah trembled. But why us? Why bring us here? Calder stepped closer. His voice dropped to a whisper smooth as silk. Because the curse requires trespassers' blood to fully awaken. Jonah stumbled back. Lena clenched her jaw. He's waking already. Yes, Calder said. He will take his true form soon. Thanks to you. Lena's hand drifted toward her weapon. Calder chuckled. Guns will not help you. They wouldn't even help me. Something shifted in the house overhead. Heavy footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Jonah whimpered. Is that him? Not yet, Calder answered. But soon. Very soon. Lena stared into his eyes. Why tell us all this? Calder smiled. Because you deserve to know why you're dying tonight. Jonah cried out. Lena reached for her knife. Calder closed his eyes for a breath. When he opened them, they glowed brighter, almost burning. But not yet, he murmured. He isn't fully ready. And then, he stepped backward, into the shadows, and vanished. No sound, no footsteps, just gone. Jonah collapsed. Marco punched the wall hard enough to bloody his knuckles. Lena stood still, staring at the dark corner where Calder had disappeared, listening to the faint hum of the relics in her pack. Albert was waking, and Calder had just promised them death. The palazzo shifted. Not metaphorically, literally. As soon as Calder vanished, the walls groaned like something alive waking from a deep, angry sleep. The marble under their feet trembled. Lena spun, backpack tight against her shoulders, gripping the relics. Jonah pressed himself to the wall, pale and shaking. Marco swore under his breath, blood still drying on his sleeve. Then the corridor behind them changed. A doorway stretched upward, elongating unnaturally. The wall to their right rippled like water. The left side compressed, shrinking into a narrow stone throat. Lena, Jonah whispered. The house, it's breathing. And in a way, it was. Every shift came with a hiss, like lungs expanding. Every rearranged hallway felt deliberate, as if the palazzo itself was thinking, deciding, hunting. Marco grabbed Jonah's wrist, dragging him forward. We can't stay here. Move. They ran. But the hallway they entered wasn't the same as before. It branched into three, each path identical, each lit with flickering chandeliers that swung on their chains as if shaken by invisible hands. Jonah clutched his temples. It's changing, Lena. It's changing faster. I know, she said, pulling him along. Just keep your eyes open. And don't let go. As they rushed toward the farthest corridor, a soft voice drifted through the air. Jonah. Lena froze. Jonah froze too. Reed's voice. Calling.
Weak.
Hurting. Jonah. Jonah's breath hitched. Reed? Reed, is that you? Reed, answer me. Jonah, don't, Lena snapped. But he was already moving, pulled not by logic but by grief, guilt, and hope. The corridor ahead flickered again. The lights dimmed. The walls breathed inward. Marco lunged after him.
Kid, stop.
You can't chase. Jonah shoved Marco away, eyes glazed. He needs me. He's alive. I heard him. That wasn't him, Lena said, stepping in front of Jonah. The house is copying voices. It's trying to break us. But Jonah didn't hear her. He heard Reed. He shook free of Lena's grip and sprinted down a narrow hall that hadn't existed a moment ago. Jonah. Lena raced after him. Marco cursed and followed. The hallways stretched endlessly, elongating with each step like a cruel trick. Jonah was ahead of them, running toward a shadowy doorway where Reed's voice whispered again. Help me? The ancestral guardian appeared. Not fully, but enough. A slithering mass of bone and smoke peeled itself from the ceiling, ribcage splitting open like a blooming, skeletal flower. Claws scraped along the walls, leaving molten cracks. Its eyes, two pits of burning dark, locked onto Jonah. He skidded to a stop too late. The creature dropped. Jonah screamed as it wrapped its elongated limbs around him, dragging him upward. Lena sprinted, knife drawn, Marco close behind. They reached him just as the creature's jaw unhinged, too wide, too impossible. It pulled Jonah into the wall. Lena got one hand around Jonah's wrist.
Hold on, she yelled.
Jonah sobbed, kicking. Don't let me go. Don't, Lena, please. Marco grabbed her waist, anchoring her, pulling hard. Jonah's fingers slipped. His nails scraped her skin, desperate. Then, a sickening crunch. Jonah screamed once, the sound shredding into something inhuman as the creature yanked him fully through the stone. His arm vanished. His legs vanished. His voice
stopped.
Lena collapsed to her knees, trembling. Marco stood frozen, horror carved into his face. He's just gone. Lena didn't speak.
Couldn't.
Jonah's last scream echoed in her skull. The house hummed again. Satisfied, Marco backed away from the wall, breathing hard. We're next. You know that, right? We're dead. All of us. Marco, Lena whispered, forcing herself to stand. We need to keep moving. Moving where? Marco snapped. We don't even know what's real anymore. Lena grabbed the relics from her backpack. They burned her palms, alive with energy, red lightning swirling under the surface of the gems. Marco stared at them with something new in his eyes. Desperation. We could bargain, he said quietly. With Albert. Lena stiffened. What? Hear me out, Marco said, stepping toward her. We give him the jewels. We beg. We deal. Albert's a monster, sure, but monsters bargain. Monsters make deals. Albert isn't human anymore, Lena said. He won't negotiate, he'll slaughter us. Not if we give him what he wants. Lena took a step back. Marco took a step forward. His voice dropped into something dark. Give me the jewels, Lena. She tightened her grip.
No.
Marco's jaw clenched. You're going to get us killed.
No. Calder is, she said.
Albert is. The house is. But I'm not giving up the only leverage we have. Marco's gaze flicked behind her. Marco. Lena whispered. He smiled faintly. Too faintly. You've got more enemies than you think. Lena spun. Calder stood behind her. She hadn't heard him approach. No footsteps. No breath.
Just there.
A shadow wearing a human shape. He smiled pleasantly at Marco. You called? Marco exhaled shakily. I want a deal. Calder stepped closer, voice velvet and venom. I thought you might.
Take me, Marco said.
Spare me.
Let me walk out.
I'll give you the jewels. Lena's heart dropped. Calder tilted his head. You'd betray your team? Marco didn't hesitate. They're already dead. Calder smiled. You may be useful after all. Lena lunged, but Marco was faster. He snatched the relics from her hands and bolted down the nearest corridor. The house responded instantly, doors rearranging to open cleanly for him, hallways stretching out in his direction like welcoming arms. Calder didn't chase him. He didn't need to. They always try to bargain, Calder said softly, watching Marco vanish around a bend. And bargains with Albert always end badly. Then he looked at Lena. His smile widened. You, however, still interest him. Before she could swing her knife, the corridor behind him folded in on itself, literally closing, and Calder was gone. Lena sank against the wall, breath ragged, the house humming around her like a heartbeat. Jonah was gone. Reed was gone. Marco had betrayed her. The relics were no longer in her hands. The palazzo shifted again, walls twisting, floor tilting, doors sliding into new shapes. The house was her enemy now, and the monster inside Albert was almost awake. Marco ran, panting, stumbling, clutching the relics to his chest as the palazzo shifted around him like a living thing anticipating his fear. Doors opened for him. Hallways stretched. Lights flickered, guiding him deeper, 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 toward the one place no thief should ever walk into on purpose. Albert Martins's private chamber. Lena, far behind, could only follow the echoes of footsteps, of a heartbeat that wasn't hers, of the house's soft hum of approval. She clutched her knife, so tight her knuckles burned as she and Trix forced their way through the twisting corridors. But Marco was already beyond their reach. The chamber sealed behind him the moment he entered. Marco froze, panting, staring into the endless dark. His only light came from the relics, pulsing crimson, illuminating the black walls, casting long, distorted shadows. Then a voice drifted through the chamber.
Low.
Ancient.
Pleased.
You brought them to me.
Marco spun.
Albert? Albert Martins. Silence stretched. Then, a silhouette appeared. Not fully formed. Not fully human. A tall, shifting shadow, edges rippling like smoke. Two faint embers glowed where eyes should be. Marco's breath caught. I didn't want to steal them. She forced us. The others convinced me. I want to make it right. The silhouette drifted closer. Marco backed away until he hit the cold wall. I'll return them, Marco whispered. The jewels. The regalia. All of it. Just spare me. Please. I can help you. I can serve you. I can. A hand reached out of the darkness. Long, pale. Not entirely solid. It touched Marco's cheek. Marco froze. Albert's voice whispered in his ear, quieter than breath, older than the stones beneath them. No one who takes from me walks out whole. Marco trembled. I can still. Albert dragged a single finger down Marco's cheek. Where it passed, Marco's skin blackened. Veins spread like ink. His breath hitched, a strangled whimper. That, Albert murmured, is your warning. Then Albert's other hand rose. And Marco screamed. Lena heard it from 2 floors away. A sharp, ragged shriek that cut through the maze, echoing down every hall. Trix winced, gripping her bleeding side. That was Marco. Lena didn't slow. Couldn't. He has the jewels. If Albert gets them. He wakes fully, Trix gasped. And we die. All of us. A roar tore through the floorboards above them. The ancestral guardian. It knew. It tracked. It hungered for what Marco carried. The lights overhead blew out, showering sparks. Lena shoved Trix forward as something massive slammed into the wall behind them, cracking stone. "Move!" Lena hissed. They sprinted, ducking into a wide corridor where moonlight streamed through high windows. The creature lunged out of a shadow, bone claws slashing. Trix screamed as one caught her shoulder, tearing deep. Lena tackled her out of the way, rolling hard across the floor. The creature rose to full height, taller than any human, bones twisting like roots, smoke curling from its eye sockets. It struck again, but something tackled it from the side. Calder. Blood dripped from him, his jacket torn, his movement shaky, but still inhumanly fast. He slammed the creature into a column, growling something guttural. The creature shrieked, twisting, snapping at him. Calder held it off with one arm, though its claws dug into his forearm, ripping flesh. "Go!" he snarled at Lena without looking at her. "I cannot hold it long."
Trix tried to stand.
Her legs buckled. "Lena, just leave me." "Not happening." Lena dragged her up, throwing Trix's arm over her shoulders. The creature twisted, breaking Calder's grip. It lunged. Lena swung one of the smaller jewels into its skull. Crack. The jewel split. A burst of red lightning erupted, blinding, loud, shaking the entire wing. The creature screamed, collapsing into smoke and bone fragments. Lena recoiled. The jewel in her hand fizzled, energy drained. Calder staggered, panting, skin ashen. Breaking the relics weakens it. Trix coughed blood. But breaking them frees Albert. Lena looked down at the shattered piece in her hand. One down.
Too many more to go.
And every one broken made Albert stronger. They found Marco's body 20 minutes later. Or what was left of it. The relics lay neatly beside him, untouched, humming faintly, almost proud. Marco himself had been arranged like a warning. Arms placed over his chest. Head turned toward the doorway. Eyes wide, frozen in terror. His limbs wrong angles. Too many cuts to count. A symbol carved into his cheek. Albert's mark. Lena's breath trembled. Trix covered her mouth, trying not to vomit. Calder stepped into the room behind them, voice quiet and uncomfortably calm. "Albert doesn't bargain." Lena didn't reply, but the meaning was clear. Albert was awake enough to kill, awake enough to play. And with every relic shattered, he grew closer to becoming the thing his ancestors had chained centuries ago. Lena stared at Marco's ruined body, at the relics shimmering inches from it. Then she lifted her chin. "Fine," she whispered. "If Albert wants them back, he'll have to take them from me." Because now she understood. If she didn't destroy him, Albert would destroy the world. The chamber shook with a guttural roar that seemed to claw at the stone walls. Dust rained down like fractured rain, and the torches flickered in protest, as if even fire feared the sound. Lena pressed herself against the far wall, heart hammering, eyes wide as shadow and fury tore through the corridors. The ancestral guardian had awoken. It came first as a whisper, a low growl that rattled the bones in her ears. Then the silhouette materialized, enormous, impossibly fast, moving with a predatory grace that defied its bulk. Eyes glowed like molten gold, claws struck sparks from stone. The air itself seemed to shiver with its rage. This was Albert, or what he had been before the regalia restrained him. "Go now!" Trix screamed, her voice cutting through the terror like steel. Lena didn't hesitate. She could only watch as Trix hurled herself into the path of the guardian, arms outstretched, forcing it to pause. Energy flared around her, a radiant shield of desperate magic. The guardian's momentum faltered, and for a moment, the creature roared in frustration rather than triumph. "Run!" Trix shouted again, and Lena obeyed, tears streaking her dirt-smeared face. The air vibrated with the guardian's fury. Every step it took left cracks in the stone floor. Every breath it exhaled carried the weight of centuries. Trix's sacrifice bought only moments, but moments were all Lena needed. The corridor beyond the chamber opened to a wider hall. Lena stumbled through, chest heaving, and froze when a figure staggered into view. Calder. His body was torn, ragged, some bones clearly broken, flesh lacerated, yet he stood. Every inch of him bore the scars of the hunt, but the spark in his eyes burned undiminished. I'm not done yet, he rasped, voice ragged but steady. Oaths, they keep me alive. Lena's legs nearly gave way. Calder, you shouldn't be standing. I should be dead, he admitted, leaning heavily against the wall. Blood oozed from cuts that would have felled any ordinary man.
But this isn't ordinary.
Not with what's coming. He swallowed, grimacing, then forced himself upright. I need to tell you the truth. She nodded, words lost in the panic that still throbbed through her veins. Calder's eyes searched hers, weighty with a burden too great for any mortal to carry alone. The regalia, he began, voice low and steady despite his injuries, was never just a symbol of power. Albert's ancestors, they bound the monster inside him to it. Every jewel, every ornament, it holds the essence, the fury, the hunger of what he truly is. Lena's stomach churned. You mean the creature, it's him? It's always been him, Calder said. He winced, gripping a jagged wall pillar for support. Without the regalia, the monster inside Albert is unstoppable. He's no longer just a man, he's the fury of generations. He's everything the regalia was meant to contain. The stone beneath their feet trembled. Lena's breath caught. He's coming, she whispered. A new sound emerged from the darkness, slow and deliberate. Footsteps. Heavy. Crushing. Each one echoed off the walls like a drum of doom. Lena's eyes darted to the shadowed corners, and the faint flicker of torchlight revealed shapes that shouldn't exist, walls moving as if the building itself were alive. Albert's voice slithered through the cracks, low and mocking, yet unmistakable. Lena had hissed. I can smell your fear. I can see your heart. The walls vibrated with his presence, yet no form appeared. Lena pressed herself against a wall, every instinct screaming to run, yet nowhere seemed safe. The footsteps came closer, measured, each one deliberate, as though savoring the fear it provoked. Lena, the voice repeated, now through the floorboards, through the very stone, twisting the air with its resonance. You can't hide. You can't fight what's inside me. Calder moved beside her, painfully slow, every motion labored. Listen to me, he said, grabbing her arm. You have to understand, Albert isn't just a man anymore. He's the culmination of centuries of rage. If he reaches full form, he paused, swallowing the bile rising in his throat. There will be. The shadows shifted. The air grew thick, almost viscous, and a low growl rolled through the hall, vibrating in their chests. Lena could feel it, not just in her ears but in her bones. The monster was moving closer. Suddenly, the corridor ahead shuddered violently. Dust fell in great clouds as the floor cracked and a wave of cold, almost sentient air swept past them. The voice, now unmistakably Albert's, emerged from every surface, walls, ceiling, floor, twisting around them like a predator, circling its prey. Your friends cannot save you, it murmured. You cannot escape. You will belong to me. Calder's hand tightened around Lena's, pressing a small object into her palm. Keep this close. The regalia, it's the only thing that can hold him back, even for a moment. Even for a moment, he repeated, grimacing as he forced himself to stand upright. We need a plan. You listen to me. Do exactly what I say. We might survive. Lena nodded, heart hammering, but fear threatened to steal her voice. I understand. From somewhere beyond the shadows, a resonant sound of claws scraping stone echoed, each step measured, deliberate, patient. It was close now, impossibly close, as though the walls themselves had taken form. And then silence. A silence that was heavier than any roar. Lena's pulse raced. Calder's ragged breathing filled the void. The shadows waited. The guardian waited. Albert waited. And somewhere, deep within the walls, a whisper promised one thing with certainty. The hunt had only just begun. The echo of Albert's footsteps had become a relentless drumbeat in Lena's mind. The walls themselves seemed to bend, twisting around her, guiding her toward inevitable confrontation. She and Calder stumbled into a vast hall, its vaulted ceiling splintered by centuries of decay, dust and rubble falling with every heartbeat. Albert emerged from the shadows like a living nightmare, hulking, predatory, eyes burning with a gold that devoured all light. "You can't run," his voice rumbled, reverberating through the stones, vibrating through their very bones. "There is nowhere left for you." Calder planted himself in front of Lena, dragging himself upright despite every shred of agony in his torn body. "Stay behind me," he said, voice tight with pain but edged with determination. I can stop him, maybe." The monster within Albert sneered, if a creature of rage could sneer. With a motion too fast to follow, he lunged, closing the distance between them in heartbeats. Calder braced himself, and for a moment, it seemed he might hold. And then he did something Lena never expected. "Albert, I break my oath," Calder shouted, voice echoing like a battle cry. "I cannot, will not, stand aside any longer." Albert's eyes narrowed, a cruel twist of amusement and fury. With a single strike, he crushed Calder as though the man were made of clay. Bones snapped, ribs caved, and Calder's cry was cut short, though the glint of his eyes showed defiance that even death could not fully claim. Lena stumbled backward, horror lancing through her chest. Calder gone. But even in that instant, a sliver of hope remained. The man's defiance had bought her the time she needed. Her gaze flicked to the regalia. The jewels glimmered atop a pedestal, pulsing with a malevolent light. Albert's focus was on Calder, on the act of punishment, leaving a narrow window. Heart pounding, Lena ran, vaulting over debris, ignoring the splintered stone that sliced her hands and arms. She reached the pedestal and grabbed the jewels. "Lena," Albert's voice twisted through the walls, deep and terrifying, a sound that promised annihilation. "You cannot." She didn't listen. With every ounce of strength and desperation, she smashed the jewels against the cold marble floor. The impact sent sparks flying, a surge of energy exploding outward in every direction. The world erupted. A shockwave of pure, supernatural force hurled Lena backward. The walls groaned as if the palazzo itself were crying out in agony. Dust, splintered wood, and shards of stone tore through the air, lightning-like arcs of energy snapping where the regalia's power had been unleashed. The creature's roar became a scream, a twisting, unearthly sound that tore through the hall and into Lena's very soul. Albert convulsed, the monstrous form within him unraveling, screaming against the bonds that had restrained him no more. And then, silence. Calder, who had stood defiantly against impossible odds, began to disintegrate. Dust fell from his body, scattered by the shockwave, his sacrifice complete. Lena barely registered his disappearance, her mind reeling from the raw force that filled the chamber. Albert collapsed, human and monstrous aspects intertwined, a shadow of the fury he had been moments before. He fell to his knees, coughing, weakened, his eyes, once molten gold, now dim, flickering like dying embers. The palazzo around them protested violently. Columns splintered and toppled, ceilings cracked and fell, marble slabs fractured into jagged teeth of stone. The hallways quaked as the building itself began to collapse. Lena scrambled to her feet, adrenaline surging, ignoring pain that screamed from every scraped limb. Flames licked the edges of wooden beams, smoke thickening the air. Dust choked her, stinging her eyes, but she didn't stop. She ran, dodging falling stone, diving through collapsing arches, the roar of fire and destruction consuming the hall around her. Albert's weakened form shambled behind her, a grotesque shadow amid the chaos, but his steps lacked the certainty and unstoppable momentum of moments before. Lena risked a glance over her shoulder. The creature's fury was contained for now. She burst into the main courtyard just as a massive section of ceiling collapsed behind her, sending clouds of dust and fire into the night. The regalia lay shattered in the ruins, its power dispersed into nothingness. Lena stumbled to the edge of the courtyard, coughing, burning, bleeding, but alive. The palazzo groaned one final time, as if acknowledging its own destruction, then began to settle into ruin. Smoke rose in thick plumes, carrying with it the echo of the monstrous roar that had nearly consumed them all. Lena sank to her knees amidst rubble and embers, hands trembling, chest heaving. Calder was gone. Albert was defeated, but the weight of what she had witnessed pressed down on her like a stone. The regalia was shattered. The monster was dead. And yet the night still seemed impossibly vast, and the cost of survival heavy in her bones. Somewhere in the shadows, a faint whisper remained. Not Albert, not Calder, not tricks, but the memory of what had been unleashed. Lena closed her eyes, trembling, knowing that the echoes of this night would follow her forever. And somewhere, deep within the ruins, the palazzo waited for the next heartbeat of fate. Dawn was breaking as Lena stumbled through the debris-strewn streets beyond the palazzo. Smoke rose in thick plumes, mingling with the pale light of the morning, turning everything a sickly gold. Her clothes were torn, streaked with blood and dust. Her hands shook, clutching the single surviving jewel, the only thing preventing Albert from achieving the monstrous form that had almost consumed them all. Her breaths came in ragged gasps, each one a battle against exhaustion. Behind her, somewhere in the ruins of the palazzo, a faint sound drifted through the smoke. Laughter. Low, mocking, unmistakably Albert's. Lena's stomach twisted. Even weakened, he remained terrifying. Even shattered, his presence lingered like a predator that refuses to die. She ran. Her legs were leaden, scraped, and bleeding, yet she didn't stop. The city around her was waking, oblivious to the horrors she had witnessed. Narrow alleyways, quiet streets, the distant clang of shutters and early traffic. Each step was a desperate race for survival. By the time she reached a main street, the first responders had begun to arrive. Sirens blared in the distance, growing louder, punctuating the chaos she carried in her mind. Ambulances skidded onto the scene, their lights slicing through smoke and dust. Police followed, their presence official, but their expression skeptical. Lena tried to speak, tried to explain. The palazzo, Albert, the regalia, her voice cracked. She waved her hands frantically, pointing toward the ruined building. The officers stared, eyes wide, mouths half open. One shook his head. "Ma'am, calm down. There's been a fire. Injuries reported, that's all we have." She could see their minds ticking through explanations, structural collapse, overzealous rumors, trauma. Nothing matched the truth she carried. The monstrous guardian, Calder's sacrifice, the jewels, Albert's near-apocalyptic rage. They would never believe her. Lena swallowed the lump in her throat. The jewel pulsed faintly in her palm, a constant reminder of the thin line between survival and total annihilation. She didn't wait for permission, didn't wait for anyone to understand. She disappeared into the shadows of the city, slipping through narrow alleyways, ducking behind carts, and avoiding the curious eyes of passers-by. The city was waking, indifferent to the chaos that had almost consumed it. Lena moved like a ghost, silent, unseen, carrying the weight of what she alone now knew. Every instinct screamed caution. Albert could return, could find her at any moment. She could not let him. Far behind, in the ruins of the palazzo, Albert lingered. Weakened, yes, but the light of dawn glinted off the scattered rubble like a crown. He rose, brushing dust and splinters from his tattered form, eyes narrowing as he followed her flight through the shadows. A smile curved his lips. It was not a smile of satisfaction, but of anticipation, of hunger, a promise wrapped in malice. The jewel she carried was a thread, holding back the storm that dwelled inside him. Yet even as he watched her disappear into the labyrinth of the city, he knew the game was not over. Not by a long shot. The streets twisted and turned, shadows swallowing her form, but Lena's senses were sharp, attuned to every sound, every shift of air. Every echo of Albert's laughter was a warning, a reminder that the predator had not vanished, only bided its time. And as the city hum of morning life carried on, Oblivious to the horrors that had occurred in its heart, Lena's resolve hardened. She would survive. She would protect the jewel. She would remain unseen, untraceable, prepared for the next inevitable encounter. Albert's gaze never left the distant figure of her retreating form. From the rubble, he watched the city stretch beneath him like a chessboard. Every street, every alley, every shadow held possibility. And somewhere within that maze, Lena carried the key to the one thing he still craved: full transformation. The smile lingered, low and menacing. The hunt was far from over. In the rising sun, Lena's silhouette vanished into the city's depths. Behind her, the palazzo smoked and groaned, a ruined testament to the fury that had passed through it. And within its ruins, Albert's presence waited, patient, calculating, unstoppable in its promise. A new hunt had begun.